Hello Seahawks. Today you're going to be taking notes on adding and subtracting rational numbers. Here is the start of your notes page. We're going to learn how to add and subtract like fractions, add and subtract unlike fractions, add and subtract mixed numbers, and add and subtract decimals. Okay, the first thing that we're going to talk about is adding and subtracting like fractions. And this is pretty simple, and you have learned this before, so this should be a review for you. When you have like fractions, that means the denominator is the same on both fractions. All you have to do is add the numerator, and you keep the denominator the same. So if you look for what I have here, you're finding the sum of 7/8 and 5/8. All you're going to do is add the numerator. 7 plus 5 equals 12. And then you put that over the same denominator, so 12 over 8. And you must always simplify. That's very, very important. Okay? If you're finding the difference of like fractions, that means they have the same denominator. All you're going to do, I have 7/8 minus 5/8. So you subtract 7 minus 5, which is 2, and you put that over your original denominator, 2 over 8, and again you must simplify, so that simplifies to 1/4. Okay, let's give it a try. Now, if you've noticed, we have negative 6/11 plus 5/11, and this is probably the only difference from what you've learned, because you've learned how to add and subtract fractions with like fractions with the same denominator, but maybe, well, you probably didn't learn it with integers. Okay, so we both of these fractions have 11 as the denominator, so we're just going to take the numerator. However, because this is a negative 6/11, you could think of that as negative 6 plus 5. Okay, you take your numerator and you subtract them, but the 6 is the negative. So now you have to remember your integer rules. Same signs add, different signs subtract, take sign of larger number. Okay, well, I have a negative and I have a positive, so I have different signs. Different signs subtract. 6 minus 5 is 1, and take sign of larger number. 6 is the larger number, 6 is negative, so it would be a negative 1, and you put it over the denominator that you had, which was 11. And if you could simplify that, you would, but negative 1/11 is already simplified, so you're done. Okay, we have 12/13 minus 7/13. We have the same denominator, so that's good. All we're going to do is 12, and that's a positive, 12 minus 7. Okay, and 12 minus 7 is 5 over 13. And simplify that if you can. It's already simplified, so we're done. Okay, and on the next one we have same denominator, 1 and 8, both of those. So we have 1 minus 5. Okay, now let's think about our integer rules. 1 is a positive. We're going to think of this as a negative 5. So we have different signs subtract. 5 minus 1 is 4, and 5 is your bigger number, so that's a negative 4 over 8. And that simplifies to negative 1/2. So this is the only difference. You've learned how to add and subtract like fractions, but you didn't have positives and negative numbers there. Okay, so now we have positive and negative fractions that we're dealing with. So you have to remember your integer rules. And remember how I told you, in math repeats. We learned all about integers. We're going to be using those integers for the entire year and next year, and the next couple years. Okay, so now we're going to talk about adding and subtracting unlike fractions. And I apologize, I'm looking at this now, and it is a little bit blurry, but you do have that on your paper. When you have unlike fractions, that means you have different denominators. You need to find the common denominator first. Best if you find the least common denominator, and then you're going to add or subtract your numerators and keep your denominator like you did. So you're going to actually just change them into like fractions. Okay, let me go to take this picture over because it's a little too blurry. Okay, this looks better. Okay, so we're going to find the sum of 1/4 and 2/3. So you need to find the common denominator of 4 and 3. Okay, well the common denominator, the least common denominator of 4 and 3 is 12. So you're actually going to rename the fractions with the common denominator. You're renaming 1/4 with 12 as the denominator. So what you could do, and I showed you this here, okay, 4 times 3 is 12, so 1 times 3 is 3. So I just changed 1/4 to 3/12. And then I'm going to change 2/3 with a denominator of 12. So 3 times 4 is 12, so 2 times 4 is 8. So now my fractions are 3/12 plus 8/12. Now I have the same denominator. All you're going to have to do is add the numerators. 8 plus 3 is 11, and it's 11/12. Can't simplify that. It's already simplified. If you want to give the next 3 a try on your own, you may. And I'm going to start with them next. So we have 3/8 and 7/12. The common denominator for 8 and 12, you have to think of, your best bet is to find the least common denominator. Well, 8 and 12, you can't use 8, you can't use 12. So let's think of multiples of 12 that 8 would also go into. So we have 12, 24. Does 8 go into 24? It does. So our common denominator is going to be 24. Okay, we have 8 times 3 is 24. So 3 times 3 would be 9. And then 12 times 2 is 24. So 7 times 2 is 14. So we have 9 24ths plus 14 24ths. Okay, and now you're just going to add your 9 and your 14. And 9 plus 14 is 23 over 24. And if you could simplify that, you would, but it's already simplified, so we're good. If you'd like to pause this, you may, and then come back to it after you've done it on your own. That's fine. Okay, we have 21 and 7, so we need to find the common denominator for 21 and 7. Well, this is a negative. Keep that there, okay? The common denominator for 21 and 7 would be 21. 21 works for both of those. So when you have that as your common denominator, 21, we could keep the negative 5 over 21, and now we're just going to rename 6/7 to have 21 as the denominator. So 7 times what is 21? 7 times 3 is 21, so 6 times 3 is 18. Okay, now I have 21 as my denominator, and now I have negative 5 plus 18. Okay, you got to remember your integer rules. Do I have same signs or different signs? I have a negative 5 and a positive 18, so I have different signs. Subtract. 18 minus 5 is 13, and is it a positive or a negative 13? It's a positive because 18 is the bigger number, and 21 is your denominator. And that's already simplified, so we're good. Okay, the next one, we have negative 5/6 minus 3/4. What would be the common denominator for 6 and 4? And notice when I start to write this, I put my negative sign there automatically so I don't forget about that. Okay, 6 and 4. Let's think. Okay, 4 does not go into 6 evenly. 8, no, that doesn't work. 4, 8, 12, yes. 12 is divisible by 6, so we could use 12 as our denominator. And we have 6 times 2 is 12, so 5 times 2 is 10. And 4 times 3 is 12, so 3 times 3 is 9. Okay, now I have a common denominator, 12, and I have negative 10 minus 9. Think of your integer rules. Here's a negative, and we could think of this as a negative 9. So I have same signs or different. They're the same signs. Same signs add. 10 plus 9 is 19. Oops. And which number is bigger? 10's bigger, so it's a negative 19 over 12. And that's already simplified. I am absolutely fine with you leaving them as improper fractions. I know in the past you may have been told not to. You could change it into a mixed number, but I actually am totally okay with just leaving it as negative 19/12 as long as it's simplified. If you wanted to change it to a mixed number, negative 1 and 7/12, you're just doing an extra step. It's not necessary. I think that the improper fraction is good as long as it's simplified. Okay, so those are our adding and subtracting unlike fractions. Okay, now we're going to be talking about adding and subtracting mixed numbers. Okay, now it's really going to be the same as adding and subtracting unlike fractions and like fractions, depending on the denominator. However, you're not going to add and subtract mixed numbers. Now, some people think that they can just do the whole number and then the fractions, but that could mess you up if you don't do it properly. So in my opinion, you should change your mixed numbers to improper fractions, find the common denominator, and then add in or subtract them as you do with the unlike or like fractions. So if you look at the example I have here, make that a little bit bigger. Okay, we have 1 and 2/9 plus negative 2 and 1/3. I changed 1 and 2/9 to a mixed number. Okay, you do 9 times 1, which is 9, plus 2 is 11. That's where I got the 11 from. And then you keep it over the same denominator, plus negative 7/3. You do, and that's there. You keep that a negative. You don't count the negative when you're changing it into an improper fraction. You just do 3 times 2, which is 6. 6 plus 1 is 7/3. So now I have 11/9 plus negative 7/3. You have unlike denominators, so you have to find a common denominator. 9 would be your common denominator, so you're going to keep 11/9. Okay, and then you're going to change your 7/3, negative 7/3, I should say, to the denominator of 9. So 3 times 3 is 9. That's what I'm doing here. And 7 times 3 is 21. So I have 11/9 plus negative 21/9. Now you're adding 11 plus negative 21. And that's, you have different signs, so you should subtract. You get negative 10, because 21's the bigger number, negative 10 over 9. You could leave it just like that as long as it's simplified, or you could change it to a mixed number, but again, that's not necessary. Negative 1 and 1/9. Okay, now let's give them a try, see how we do. Okay, your first example, you have negative 6 and 2/3, so let's change that to an improper fraction. It's going to be a negative fraction. 3 times 6 is 18, plus 2 is 20 over 3, minus 8 over 9. Okay, we have unlike fractions, so we need to find a common denominator. The common denominator of 3 and 9 would be 9, so we could keep my negative 8/9 there. And we're going to change this to a 9. 3 times 3 is 9, so 20 times 3 is 60. Negative 60 over 9 minus 8/9. So we have a common denominator. We have negative 60 minus 8. Okay, this is a negative, so we have same signs add. Negative 60 and a negative 8 gives me negative 68 over 9. Oops, let me fix that so I have more room. I'm running out there, negative 68 over 9. And that is simplified, so you could leave it as that, which I'm totally fine with. Or you could write it as an improper fraction. Negative 9 goes into that 7 times with 5 left over. So it would be negative 7 and 5/9. Okay, either one of those answers is fine. Like I said, I'm fine with you leaving as the improper fraction as long as it's simplified. Okay, number 8, let's change them into improper fractions. Now, Now I'm going to show you this one both ways. I could have done with this with the last one too. Sometimes it isn't a bad idea to keep them as the mixed numbers, because in this case you're adding it together. If you look, we have a negative and a negative. So you have same signs and same signs you're going to add. And I'm going to show you why it works okay for this one. What we're going to do is we're just going to take our 1/6 and our 11/18, and they're both negative. Okay, so we're going to add them. We need to find the common denominator of 6 and 18, which would be 18. Okay, and they're both negative. We could keep that negative 11/18. 6 times 3 is 18, so 1 times 3 is 3. Okay, now we have same signs. We've already said same signs add. 3 plus 11 is 14, and that would be a negative 14 over 18. And that simplifies to divisible by 2, so it will be 7/9. Now here's why I don't like you doing this, because I'm afraid you're going to forget your whole number, number 1. And if this, that's not your answer, but if this number here, if this fraction here was bigger than a whole, then you would have to add that into your whole number. Okay, so now I'm going to add negative 4 plus negative 7, which would give me a negative 11. And that would be a negative 11 and 7/9. And that seems to be easier than working with the big numbers of the improper fractions. I'm going to show you the improper fractions on this one now. But that only works when you're adding them, and because they're the same signs, you can add. And then also you have to make sure that when you're finished, that this number here, this fraction here, is smaller than a whole. Okay, I am going to show you this as an improper fraction, but that's the easier way to do that problem. Let me just get rid of all this. I could do that. Okay, and now we're going to change them into improper fractions. This is, again, the harder way. Okay, so I would change 6 times 4 is 24, plus 1 is 25. 6 plus, and this is where it's harder. 18 times 7 is a big number. That would be 126 plus 11 is 137 over 18. And you're dealing with big numbers, and that's why this isn't fun to do. Okay, this one will stay the same. Our common denominator is still 18. 6 times 3 is 18, so 25 times 3 is 75. And what happens, you have same signs add, so you get a negative 212 over 18, which can be simplified to, it's divisible by 2, negative 106 over 9, which is fine. You could leave it at that, or you can write it as an improper fraction, and you still get the same answer, 11 and 7/9. Okay, now again, this is an or. You're dealing with bigger numbers when you change that into an improper fractions. Because we are adding on that one, it works out nicely to keep that as the whole numbers and the mixed numbers, and the fractions separate. That's your choice. Okay, looking at number 9, I have, well, look here, I have a negative 3 2/5 minus a negative. I have that double negative, and we don't like the double negative, so we're going to keep change here first. Okay, and when I do that, I'm going to change it into improper fractions. So we have a negative, 3 times 5 is 15, plus 2 is 17/5. Change my subtraction to addition. I'm going to change my negative 2 to a positive, 2 and 4/7, and 7 times 2 is 14, plus 4 is 18 over 7. Okay, and I have different signs, so I'm subtracting. I need to find a common denominator for 7 and 5, which would be 35, I believe. Okay, 5 times 7 is 35, so 17 times 7, that would be 7, that would be 119. And 7 times 5 is 35, so 18 times 5 is 90. Okay, and I have a negative here and a positive here, so I have different signs. So I'm going to subtract 119 minus 90. 120 minus 90 would be 30. So that would be negative 29, and it's a negative because the 119 is the bigger number, over 35. And that's simplified, so we're done. Okay, and here we go for the last part. Okay, we are going to add and subtract decimals, and this should be pretty simple. The only thing is we have our positive and negatives. You've already added and subtracted decimals, but now we have positive and negatives to go along with it. So the most important thing when you're adding and subtracting decimals is you need to line up your decimal. Okay, let's look at number 1. We have a positive 0.23, 23 hundredths, and a negative 1.044, 1 and 44 thousandths. So we have different signs, so different signs you're going to subtract. If you'd like to look at this right away and say, well, is my answer going to be positive or negative? Well, which number is bigger? Okay, this is my bigger number, so it's going to be a negative. I'm going to throw that in there right now, so I have that. And I'm going to subtract 1.044 minus 0.23. I'm just going to add the 0 there so that lines up. And I have a 0. 4 minus 0 is 4. I'm sorry, 4 minus 3 is 1. Here I need to borrow here. 10 minus 2 is 8. Bring down my decimal. So it's negative 0.814. Negative 814 thousandths. Okay. Number 2, I have a negative 4.37, negative 4 and 37 hundredths. And we could think of that as a negative 5.096, 5 and 96 thousandths. So we have same signs or different. Well, they're both negative, so they're both the same signs. My answer is going to be negative because the bigger one is a negative. And same signs add, so I'm going to add these up. 4.37, 5.096. I'm going to add a 0 here just so it's all nicely lined up. 0 plus 6 is 6. 9 plus 7 is 16. 3 plus 1 is 4. And 5 plus 4 is 9. So my answer is negative 9.466. Negative 9 and 466 thousandths. And the last one, we have negative 128 thousandths plus 4 and 1/10. Here's a negative, here's a positive. I have different signs, so different signs I'm going to subtract. My answer is going to be positive because that's the bigger one. Okay, and we have 4.1 minus 0.128. I'm going to add some zeros here so I could subtract this. Okay, that's a 0, that's 9, that's 10 minus 8 is 2. 9 minus 2 is 7. Need to borrow here. 10 minus 1 is 9, and 3 minus 0 is 3. And we already said that's a positive 3.972, or 3 and 972 thousandths. Okay, if you have any questions, please write them down, and I will see you the next time in class. Have a great night. Let's see if there's going to be a Ryan show. Hold on a second.
Hello, I went to Disney. And you know what I saw? I saw a bunch of roller coasters. And my brother's face was crazy. It looked like this. Like that. I actually have a couple pictures. Then, one time, he was climbing out of the roller coaster. Like that.
For some reason, it's not recording. Go ahead.
And it didn't even turn on yet?
Just say about 7 verse training now. Go ahead. I don't know. Go ahead, tell them. Tell them what that is again.
This is my brother. What if they heard me?
Just continue.
I don't know.